She believed she could cut me off from my family's road and block me from my own cabin, a huge mistake. I turned her entire neighborhood into a concrete labyrinth that echoed like death itself. When a power-hungry HOA president tried to deny me access to my own cabin, she had no clue she was up against a construction contractor who actually owned the very road she depended on. What followed was 10 days of completely legal havoc that shattered her little empire, uncovered a buried murder secret, and ultimately ran her out of Pine Valley for good. This isn't just some revenge story. This is what happens when you push the wrong person past their limit. Drop a comment below. Where are you tuning in from? My name's Logan Brooks, and this wild ride began 3 months ago with a phone call that changed everything. I was in the middle of pouring a commercial foundation when my phone rang. On the other end was a lawyer, his voice heavy and serious, telling me that my grandfather, Henry Brooks, had passed away. Grandpa Henry wasn't just family, he was my mentor, the one who taught me everything I know about construction and, more importantly, about standing up for what's right. He left me his cabin in Pine Valley, a gorgeous place at the foot of the mountains that we had built together with our own hands 20 years ago. There was a curious line in the will I didn't pay much attention to at first. Remember, son, we own more than just the cabin. Check the 1955 deed. I chalked it up to Grandpa being cryptic like always. Looking back, I should have paid more attention. Grandpa Henry never wasted words. Every bit of advice he gave carried weight, like when he taught me that the strongest concrete depends on balance, not too much water, not too little. Balance is everything, Logan, he'd told me. He'd built Brooks Construction from the ground up, starting with nothing but a wheelbarrow and a stubborn resolve to do every job right. By the time he retired, our company was laying foundations for half the county's commercial buildings. He taught me that reputation is worth more than a quick buck, that your word is your bond, and that sometimes the hardest choice is the right one. When I first drove up to Pine Valley after the funeral, waves of memory hit me hard. At the pine-scented air, the crunch of gravel under my heavy-duty truck tires, the soft morning light glinting off the concrete pillars Grandpa and I had poured together. But my trip down memory lane was cut short when I noticed a woman in her early 50s snapping photos of my cabin, a calculating expression on her face. She wore a sharp business suit that looked completely out of place in the rustic mountain setting. "Can I help you?" I asked, stepping out of my truck. She turned to me with a tight, cold smile. "I don't recall being notified about any visitors to our community," she said, her voice as frosty as freshly poured concrete. I held up my keys and the legal paperwork. "I'm Logan Brooks, Henry's grandson. This cabin belongs to me now." Her eyes narrowed sharply, and I swear the air around us chilled 10 degrees. "Brooks, I don't recall seeing that name on our homeowners association member list." I couldn't help but laugh. "That's because this cabin was built back in 1970, long before your HOA ever existed." She stood there silently for a moment, her forced smile twitching. "I'm Barbara Fitzgerald, president of the Pine Valley Homeowners Association. We'll need to review your situation," she said, making review sound more like a threat than a formality. Within the first week, I was bombarded with 15A violation notices. The concrete driveway allegedly had unauthorized repairs, even though they were done back in 1990. My construction trailer was labeled an eyesore even though it was hidden behind the cabin, and my truck was deemed too commercial for the residential zone. Each notice came with a fine, and each fine was signed by Barbara A. with a smug little smiley face next to her signature. That's when my neighbor, Tom Sullivan, showed up with a 6-pack of beer and a warning. "Welcome to Barbara's kingdom," he said, shaking his head. "Last year she ran off 3 families, good people, the Martinez family, the Patels, the Jacksons. All had been here for years before Barbara took over." Tom was a friendly guy in his mid-40s, the type who'd help you pour a driveway without even being asked. But when he spoke about Barbara, a shadow crossed his face. "Be careful, Logan. She's got her husband Brad backing her up. He's a lawyer, not a good one, but he knows enough to make your life hell with paperwork." As Tom left that evening, he paused at his truck and looked back. "Your grandpa was a good man," he said quietly. "He kept his word, even when it cost him." Don't let her chase you out like she did the others. That night, I sat in the cabin, looking through old photos on the wall. Grandpa and me, covered in concrete dust, grinning as we set the foundation posts. Another photo showed him teaching me to read grade levels, the transit carefully balanced on its tripod on the workbench. On the shelf, I found an old receipt for surveyor services, dated 2019, with a handwritten note, just in case. There was also a map on the wall with red circles marking what looked like property boundaries. I noticed something else: a set of dated notebooks. Grandpa's project logs, going back decades. The most recent one was bookmarked to a page dated just 2 months before his death. The entry read, Barbara F. Getting aggressive again. Time to prepare, Logan. The truth can't stay buried forever. Just like Emily. I was reinforcing a cracked foundation wall when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number popped up. Your grandfather kept quiet for 10 years. You should too. A friend. I looked out the window just in time to see a black Lexus with tinted windows crawling past a no license plate. Something about that car gnawed at me, like knowing there's a hidden crack in a foundation you can't quite locate. This wasn't just about HOA violations or property disputes. Whatever Grandpa had been keeping secret, Barbara was desperate to keep buried. But any builder knows, secrets are like water in concrete. Sooner or later, they'll rise to the surface. The next morning, I found a certified letter taped to my door. Barbara wasn't wasting time. It announced an emergency home meeting that evening, and my strongly encouraged attendance. I loaded up my truck with rebar and foundation forms, ready to head to a job site, when I noticed something was off. The main road at the only road in and out of Pine Valley was blocked. 2 massive concrete barriers had been placed right at the entrance, with bright orange road closed. A private access sign slapped across them. Standing proudly in front of them, arms crossed and sunglasses on, was Barbara herself. Good morning, Mr. Brooks, she called out smoothly as I walked up. As you failed to comply with HOA regulations, we're exercising our right to restrict access until the matter is resolved. Behind her, Brad leaned against his car, smirking like a kid who thinks he's just won a playground fight. I kept my voice calm. Barbara, you're blocking access to my property. That's illegal. Oh, I don't think so, she purred. We've consulted legal counsel. She gave a little nod toward Brad, as if his JD from a fourth-tier law school gave him Supreme Court powers. I clenched my jaw. I think you're forgetting something important. That afternoon, Tom showed up with Mike Johnson, the old surveyor. Mike was in his late 60s, wiry, with a weathered face and a quick, sharp smile. He spread out the original survey maps on my kitchen table. Barbara's been bluffing, Mike said, tapping a calloused finger on the map. See here? This road at the one she's blocking? It's not HOA property. Never was. According to these documents, your grandfather retained ownership all the way back to the A50s. The HOA only has easement rights, and only for passage, not control. Tom let out a low whistle. So if she's denying you access a broken bar, she's the one violating the easement agreement. A slow grin spread across my face. Which means I can revoke their access if they keep this up. Tom looked at me, eyebrows raised. You thinking what I'm thinking? Oh yeah, I said. I think it's time we remind Barbara what happens when you push the wrong guy too far. That night, I got to work. I called my construction crew, explained the situation, and by dawn, we were out there with trucks, concrete mixers, and heavy equipment. We weren't blocking the road. Oh no, we were rebuilding it. I poured new barriers, set up detours, rerouted the access paths all within my own property lines. We installed motion-activated gates and laid out a perfectly legal access maze, all documented and approved under the original land rights. By the time Barbara realized what was happening, it was too late. She stormed down to the site, screaming about lawsuits and illegal construction, but I handed her a copy of the 1955 deed and the updated survey maps. You're free to use the easement, Barbara, I said calmly, but only the way it was originally intended. I pointed at the freshly marked path, a narrow, winding route around the edge of the property, far less convenient than the old direct road. Good luck getting your Lexus through there. She went pale. Brad threatened legal action, but Mike just laughed. You'd lose, son. Fast. Over the next few days, word spread like wildfire. Neighbors started dropping by, curious about the changes. Some quietly thanked me, others just watched, waiting to see how it all played out. But one thing was clear. Barbara's stranglehold on Pine Valley was slipping. My path was blocked by a massive iron gate, towering at least 10 feet tall, gleaming new under the morning sun. Where the old Pine Valley entrance used to be, there now stood an electronic keypad entry system, flanked by fresh signs that read, "Pine Valley home members only, a authorized access required." And right next to it, dressed to kill in a burgundy power suit, stood Barbara. Her grin was stretched so wide it looked almost painful. "Oh, Logan," she called out in a sing-song voice, dripping with fake sweetness. "I forgot to mention at the meeting we've upgraded our security. Only paying members get the gate code. I'm so sorry for any inconvenience." We both knew she wasn't sorry. For the first time since this whole mess started, I felt a surge of real anger bubbling up inside, like concrete curing too fast, ready to crack under the pressure. "You can't do this," I shot back, trying to keep my voice steady. "I have the right to access my property." Barbara casually pulled out her phone, pretending to scroll through something. "Actually, I can. Since you refused to pay the road maintenance fee, you're not entitled to use our roads." She smirked. "Feel free to sue me." Her eyes flicked up and down, landing on my worn work boots and dusty jeans. "Oh, a broken bar. Can construction workers even afford lawyers? I suppose you could try legal aid." She let out a sharp little laugh, a sound like rebar scraping across stone. "Brad," she called sweetly, "tell Logan about property law." Her husband emerged from the Lexus, adjusting his too-tight tie. "The hoe," he intoned in his nasal voice, "has every right to restrict access to private property, including roads. It's all perfectly legal." The sheer audacity left me momentarily speechless. I'd worked construction for 2 decades, dealt with inspectors, regulators, nightmare clients, but this was personal. Barbara wasn't just trying to inconvenience me, she wanted to break me. As I stood there, fists clenched, I noticed other residents arriving, only to stop short at the gate. Confusion flashed across their faces, quickly replaced by frustration, and then, when they spotted Barbara standing smugly by the keypad, that frustration melted into quiet resignation. They entered the code she provided, heads down, eyes averted, like prisoners shuffling into their cells. One woman, Margaret Chen, caught my eye and mouthed, "I'm sorry," before driving through. Even in their surrender, I could see it. They hated this, hated her, but fear kept them silent. That day, I had to park on the public road and hike nearly 2 miles through rough, uneven terrain just to reach my own cabin. Climbing over old barbed wire fences, pushing through thick underbrush, scratched up and exhausted by the time I arrived. My work boots weren't made for hiking, and every step fueled my growing fury. When I finally got to the cabin, it was dark. Of course, a bright notice slapped on the door informed me that my electrical service had been suspended for maintenance evaluation. Inside, by flashlight, I tore through the place, searching for anything that could help me fight back. And then I remembered Grandpa's message. The safe. I found it embedded in the basement's concrete floor, hidden under a heavy steel plate I'd once helped him install. The safe was small, steel reinforced, with a simple inscription carved on top, "For Logan when they cross the line, Grandpa." Inside were 3 items: a key to a safety deposit box at First National Bank, an old USB drive, carefully sealed in a waterproof container, and a handwritten note. "Son, if you're reading this, someone's trying to steal what's ours. The truth is darker than property lines." I kept quiet for good reasons, but I saved everything for the day when someone would need it. "The surveyor has the maps. Tom knows why. Be careful who you trust, but trust Tom. He's been waiting, just like I have." My hands trembled as I read the note. What the hell had Grandpa been hiding all these years? The USB was labeled March 15, 2014, for emergency only. The date meant nothing to me, but the way Grandpa had sealed it told me it was important. There were other items too. A folder labeled Property Records Directional, another marked Barbara F. Documentation, and, strangest of all, a small evidence bag containing shards of glass, tagged from the scene AHB. My grandfather hadn't just been keeping files. He'd been documenting something big. Document everything, Logan. I heard his old voice echo in my mind. You never know when someone's foundation of lies will need to be exposed. As if summoned by my thoughts, Tom appeared at the back door. He carried a backpack stuffed with supplies, flashlights, water bottles, sandwiches and a thick manila folder under his arm. Figured you might need some help, since Barbara cut your power, he said quietly. But his usual easygoing demeanor was gone. His face was grave, tense, older somehow. We need to talk, Logan, Tom said, pulling out a photo from the folder and laying it carefully on the table. It was a picture of a young woman, maybe early 20s, smiling brightly at the camera. This, Tom said softly, was my sister, Emily. His voice cracked. He had to pause a moment before continuing. She was 22, studying to be a nurse, had her whole life ahead of her. I sat frozen, feeling the weight of something I couldn't yet name settle on my shoulders. March 15, 2014, Tom continued. Emily was walking home after a late hospital shift. It was a quiet night. Hardly any traffic. She was on the old road, at the one that runs behind your property. He drew a shaky breath. Barbara had been at the HOA's annual gala, drinking a lot. She was driving her Lexus at nearly 60 miles an hour when she hit Emily. Tom's eyes locked onto mine. She never even stopped. The words hit me like a gut punch. I felt sick. Broken bar. I'm so sorry, Tom, I managed. But broken bar, what does this have to do with it? Tom raised his hand. Your grandfather saw everything, Logan, he said quietly. He was working late, mixing concrete, when it happened. His security camera caught the whole thing. He pulled out another photo of this one of a black Lexus, its front end smashed. Barbara reported the car stolen the next morning, Tom said, his voice bitter. A week later, it was miraculously found abandoned. The police couldn't prove anything and no witnesses, no evidence. The case went cold. I sat in stunned silence. Your grandfather knew, Tom said softly. He was going to come forward. But my mother, she couldn't bear it. She didn't want Emily's death turned into a media circus. Couldn't handle her baby girl's last moments splashed across courtrooms and headlines. So your grandfather agreed to stay quiet, Tom said, his eyes glistening. But he kept the evidence. And he told me broken bar one day, when the time was right, justice would come. The weight of it all crashed down on me. 10 years of silence, of watching Barbara rise to power, build her little empire, all on the ground where my grandfather had stood, knowing the truth. The glass fragments in the evidence bag, they weren't random. They were from Barbara's windshield. My grandfather, the meticulous man he was, had saved everything. Tom hadn't moved here just to grieve his sister. He had moved here to watch, to wait, to gather everything until Barbara's carefully stacked lies were ready to collapse. I stared again at the photo of Emily, young, bright-eyed, full of promise. Something inside me hardened, like fast-set concrete. Barbara Fitzgerald thought she could bury the past and build her little kingdom on top of it. But she was about to learn a brutal truth. No matter how deep you pour a foundation, you can still dig it up. The next morning, Tom and I went together to the bank. My hands shook as I slid the key into the safety deposit box. Inside were items that made my stomach twist. A DVD labeled security footage. March 15, 2014 hospital record showing Barbara admitted for injuries that same night, and a letter, handwritten on Barbara's own monogrammed stationery. Dear Mr. Brooks, I'm begging you to reconsider. What happened was a terrible accident. I have young children who need their mother. Please, I've enclosed a check for your silence. I know it can't bring her back, but please see broken bar. The check for $50,000 was still attached, uncashed. There was also a note from Grandpa. I kept quiet for Emily's mother, not for her killer. The truth always finds a way. Barbara thinks she owns this valley. She's wrong about a lot of things. I felt sick, but Tom's face was set like stone. She tried to buy her way out of killing my sister, he said quietly. Your grandfather was the only witness, and she knew it. That's why she's been pushing out anyone who might remember. The Martinez family saw her car that night. The Patels asked too many questions, and the Jacksons, well, Mr. Jackson was a retired cop who never believed her stolen car story. I went over the evidence carefully. The security footage showed multiple angles. One frame captured Barbara's face lit up inside the car as she looked back at Emily's body before speeding away. The hospital records were just as damning. Barbara checked in at 3:17 a.m., claiming she'd fallen down the stairs, but the attending doctor noted her injuries didn't match that story and even found possible glass fragments in her hand wound. There was also a police report filed the next morning about her Lexus being stolen from the country club. Barbara had thought of everything except Grandpa's old security cameras. That afternoon, we met with Mike Johnson, the surveyor Tom had mentioned. Mike was a tough, sharp-eyed guy in his 50s, the kind who'd worked construction before moving into land work. He spread a large, yellowing map across my kitchen table. "Look here," he said, tracing the boundary lines with his calloused finger. "This is the original survey from 1955. Your grandfather's father owned this entire area, including what's now the main road into Pine Valley. In the 1970s, when developers came in, he granted an easement. That means they could use the road, but they never owned it." Mike pulled out another document. "Here's where it gets interesting. In 2019, Barbara quietly moved the fence lines about 20 feet onto your property. She filed new paperwork with the county, but it's fraudulent. The original deed overrides everything." I stared at the old maps, my mind racing. "So you're saying a broken bar?" Mike gave a grim nod. "The road Barbara's using to lock you out? It's been your family's property all along. She's been trespassing for 5 years and she knows it. That's why she's desperate to get rid of you." It all fell into place like rebar dropping into a mold. Barbara wasn't just a power-hungry HOA president. She was covering up multiple crimes: vehicular manslaughter, fraud, property theft. "But why didn't she try this when my grandfather was alive?" I asked. Mike and Tom exchanged a look. "She did," Tom said quietly. "But Henry had something she didn't count on. Emmy." Tom's voice softened as the confession spilled out. "I wasn't just Emily's brother, Logan. I'm a licensed private investigator. After she died, I couldn't let it go. I knew Barbara was guilty, but I needed proof. So I moved here, became the friendly neighbor. And for 10 years, I've been watching every family she forced out, every shady document, every illegal move. I recorded it all. Your grandfather and I made a pact. He'd guard the evidence, and I'd wait for the right moment. When Henry got sick, he made me promise to guide you if Barbara came after you." Tom reached into his bag and pulled out a thick binder. 10 years of surveillance, he said. Inside were photos of Barbara meeting with county officials before she altered the property lines, records of her targeting certain families, financial documents showing she was siphoning off HOA funds to pay for her luxurious lifestyle. "Did you know she charges the HOA $1,500 a month for administrative services? All she does is send out violation notices. And on top of that, she's been embezzling from the road maintenance fund, which doesn't even maintain anything." The scale of Barbara's corruption was staggering. She had built an empire of fear, all to protect the lie she told the night she killed a young woman and ran. I felt crushed under the weight of it, like wet concrete pouring over me. Grandpa hadn't just left me a cabinet, he had left me a duty. But then the harsh reality hit me. The statute of limitations on the accident, a broken bar, it's long expired. Criminal charges won't stick, right? Tom leaned back in his chair, and for the first time, a thin, cold smile tugged at his mouth. "Criminal court might be out of reach," he said. "But there are other kinds of justice. Barbara values her reputation, her status, her control above everything. We're going to take it all away, Logan." Piece by piece, I sat back, letting the weight of it settle, and felt something inside me begin to shift. This was no longer just about saving my land. Her constant violation notices, that locked gate keeping me from my own damn property. I turned to Tom. "Give me 10 days. I said. "I'm handling this the way Grandpa would have wanted, a Brooks Construction style. First, I called Danny Morrison, an old Marine buddy who now ran a trucking company and still owed me a favor from Afghanistan. "Danny, remember that time in Kandahar when I saved your ass?" I asked. "Yeah," he said cautiously. "Well, I'm calling it in. I need 3 trucks of construction materials delivered tomorrow. Rebar, forms, and enough concrete to build a bunker. Oh, and Danny, make sure one of those trucks has a little broken bar accident right at the entrance to Pine Valley. Tom's eyes widened as the realization hit. You're not serious, Leah? I grinned, the first real grin I'd felt in weeks. Oh, I am. Time to show her what concrete justice looks like. Grandpa always used to say, the best revenge is perfectly legal, precisely engineered, and impossible to move without heavy machinery. At 5:30 the next morning, I was in position, hard hat on, ready for the show. 3 trucks rumbled up the mountain road, loaded with steel beams, rebar, and concrete forms. The lead driver, Danny's cousin Rick, was a master. Right in front of Barbara's fancy electronic gate, there was a loud crack, the truck's axle snapped, and tons of steel beams and rebar spilled across the road like giant metal pickup sticks. The second truck, trying to avoid the mess, jackknifed, scattering its load of concrete forms everywhere. The third truck, full of concrete mix, managed to stop, but it now completely blocked the only road in or out of Pine Valley. The timing was so perfect it could have been mistaken for a tragic accident. By 6 a.m., I was on site in full contractor mode, pacing around the wreck, clipboard in hand, looking concerned. Officer Martinez arrived first, and I swear I saw him trying not to laugh. Morning, Logan. Looks like you've got quite the mess here. I gave my best worried sigh. Officer, this is over $100,000 worth of materials for the new medical center. Each beam needs to be carefully inspected before we can move anything. These are load-bearing beams, you understand. Martinez nodded sagely. Of course. Safety first. How long you think cleanup will take? I made a show of examining a steel beam, tapping it thoughtfully. Well, with proper safety protocols and crane availability, a broken bar maybe a week. Can't rush structural steel, you know. OSHA rules. Barbara's meltdown was glorious. At 7 a.m. sharp, she rolled up for her morning patrol, only to find her precious road entirely blocked. Her face went from confused, to furious, to bright purple in under a minute. By 8 a.m., she was screaming into her phone at the police dispatcher. By 9, there were 50 cars lined up, honking horns. And Barbara? She was in the middle of it all, dressed in her perfect little business suit, looking like she might explode. By noon, I'd set up a construction site break area right next to the mess, complete with a food truck I'd called in. Gotta feed the cleanup crew, I told the increasingly irritated residents. Might be here a while. Concrete work doesn't rush. But while I slowly cleaned up over the next few days, my real plan kicked into gear. 5 of my best workers arrived with concrete trucks and equipment. Using the forms from the accident, we began constructing 12 massive concrete barriers, each 8 feet by 8 feet by 4 feet tall. But these weren't just barriers, these were architectural planters, reinforced with enough rebar to stop a tank. Each one weighed roughly 15 tons when filled. We worked through the nights, pouring concrete with quickset additives. On the faces of each barrier, we embedded bronze letters. Brooks Construction, a beautifying Pine Valley since 1955. They were built so well they technically counted as permanent architectural installations. But the real genius was what we planted inside. Late at night, Tom and I worked carefully, planting very specific types of vegetation. Ginkgo trees, whose fruit smells like rancid butter when it falls. Bradford pear trees, known for their beautiful white blossoms and their overwhelming odor of rotting fish. And my personal favorite, Titanarum bulbs, also called corpse flowers, which would bloom in about 30 days and emit a smell exactly like their name. Between the plants, we mixed in plenty of fish emulsion fertilizer. Nature's justice system, I told Tom as we finished planting. And unlike the legal system, it doesn't care about statutes of limitations. By day 6, the barriers were lined up in a carefully engineered pattern along the road. To navigate through the maze I'd built, cars now had to snake their way between the 15-ton concrete blocks. The gaps were precisely measured exactly 6 feet 1 inch at the legal minimum for emergency vehicle access. Drivers were forced to slow to a cautious 5 miles per hour. Carefully weaving between the barriers. What used to be a quick 30-second stretch of road had turned into a 7-minute crawl. At the front, a shiny bronze plaque proudly announced, Pine Valley Beautification Project, a permanent installation. Please drive carefully. Speed limit 5 miles per hour. The community's reaction came fast and loud. By day 6, residents were hammering Barbara with complaints about the delays. By day 7, the real headaches began. Delivery drivers, mail carriers, even service trucks started refusing to come in, declaring Pine Valley too tricky to access. By day 8, the complaints reached a boiling point. At the emergency home meeting Barbara called, the room was packed to the brim, and the mood, uglier than a crumbling sidewalk. Barbara stood at the podium, her usually polished appearance cracking under the pressure, her voice trembling. Logan Brooks is terrorizing our community, she shouted. He's destroyed our quality of life with these a broken bar, this concrete prison. But the crowd wasn't buying it. A woman I didn't recognize stood up. No, Barbara, she said firmly, the real question is what did you do to make him do this? There was a ripple of agreement through the room. Henry Brooks lived here for 50 years without causing a problem, the woman continued. His grandson's been here 3 months, and suddenly there's a war. Barbara's face turned pale, then blotchy red. She opened her mouth to retort, but another resident cut her off. We've been talking, Barbara, the man said, about the Martinez family, the Patels, the Jacksons, about how anyone who questions you gets driven out, about how you've turned this place into your personal kingdom. The meeting erupted into chaos. Barbara fled, Brad scrambling after her. As she stormed past where I sat quietly at the back, she hissed, "You think you've won? I'll destroy you for this." I just smiled and murmured, "Good luck moving 15 tons of concrete." Barbara's attempts to regain control spiraled into desperation over the next few days. First, she hired a few local thugs to try and smash the barriers under cover of darkness. Unfortunately for them, I'd embedded motion-activated cameras inside the concrete, a crystal-clear HD footage. Police arrested all 3 men before they even made a dent. Next, Barbara herself tried ramming the barriers with her Lexus. Big mistake. Concrete reinforced with rebar doesn't care about luxury cars. She totaled her vehicle, had to be towed out, and became the star of several viral videos titled, "HOA President vs. Concrete." A concrete wins. What Barbara didn't know was that I'd planned for every possible angle. The concrete mix I used, reinforced with fibers and steel. The barriers themselves, anchored 3 feet deep, with underground footings that spread like roots. Removing them would require city permits, environmental reviews, and a demolition budget in the hundreds of thousands. When Barbara finally understood this, she actually stamped her feet in the middle of the road like a furious toddler in full view of her neighbors. The once mighty HOA president, reduced to throwing tantrums at a line of immovable concrete. Her last-ditch legal effort backfired spectacularly. She tried to sue me for obstruction, harassment, and emotional distress. But every lawyer she approached took one look at the case and laughed her out of their offices. As one attorney told her loud enough for half the coffee shop to hear, "Lady, he put architectural planters on his own property. You're the one who moved the property lines. If anyone's got a lawsuit here, it's him for 5 years of trespassing." Then, on day 10, came the smell apocalypse. The ginkgo trees, boosted by all the fish emulsion I'd been applying daily, started dropping their pungent fruit. The Bradford pear trees, helped along by an early warm spell, burst into bloom, filling the air with their notorious dead fish scent. And the crown jewel, the Tynarium bulbs, known as corpse flowers, primed to unleash their legendary rotting flesh odor. I had done my research. Ginkgo trees are ancient, beloved in cities for their fan-shaped leaves, but the female trees drop fruit that reeks of rancid butter. Bradford pears? Pretty, sure, but their blossoms stink like rotting fish. And the Tynarium? It's the world's largest unbranched inflorescence, and it smells exactly like its nickname. All perfectly legal, all impossible to regulate. By day 12, local real estate sites showed Pine Valley's property values had dropped 15%. Pizza joints refused to deliver. Mail carriers left packages at the gate. Even Amazon drivers took one whiff and marked deliveries as undeliverable. The tipping point came when Channel 7 News showed up to cover what they gleefully called the Great Pine Valley Stink-Off. Barbara, in an attempt to save face, gave a live interview where she promptly lost it on camera, screaming about construction terrorists and botanical assaults. The reporter barely concealed a smirk as she signed off, standing proudly in front of my architectural barriers, the bronze letters gleaming behind her. The fallout was worse than I expected. Within 2 weeks, the local grocery store reported a 40% drop in business from Pine Valley residents who no longer wanted to navigate the maze of concrete barriers every day. 3 families put their homes up for sale, openly citing HOA issues as their reason for leaving. The school bus company threatened to pull service unless the traffic obstacles were removed. Even the fire department filed a formal complaint, though they reluctantly admitted the barriers were technically legal since emergency vehicles could still squeeze through. Barbara's once ironclad kingdom was crumbling, and everyone knew she was the reason. That evening, alone in my dark cabin, I finally wavered. I sat staring at Grandpa's photo, the anger and exhaustion eating at me like rust-corroding rebar. For the first time since all this began, I broke down. "Am I doing the right thing, Grandpa?" I whispered, voice shaking. "The anger, the pain, a broken bar, it's consuming me. Is this really justice, or am I just as bad as she is?" I remembered something he used to tell me back when we worked with concrete and I'd get frustrated during a tough pour. "Justice isn't about revenge, son, it's about making things right. Sometimes you have to tear down what's wrong so you can build something better. But remember, concrete is permanent. Make sure you're building something you can live with." I wiped my eyes and made a decision. It was time to give Barbara a choice. I sent her a text. "Meet me at the cabin tomorrow night. Come alone. We need to end this." The next evening, she showed up at dusk, having walked the 2 miles from the neighborhood gate through the increasingly foul-smelling air. Her designer shoes were ruined, her clothes wrinkled, her face haggard from 2 weeks of strain, but her eyes still held that cold, steely defiance. Inside the cabin, I'd set up battery-powered work lights since the electricity was still cut. My laptop sat open on the table. "Sit down, Barbara," I said quietly. "I have something to show you." Weary and suspicious, she sat. She was likely expecting some kind of trap, but not this. On the laptop screen, grainy security footage played. A Lexus pulling over on a dark road, a younger Barbara stumbling out, looking at something near her car, then panicking and driving away. The HOA banner was visible in the back window, her face, her license plate, all clearly captured. Barbara's face drained of color as she watched herself on the screen, watching the moment she had hit and killed Emily Sullivan. "Oh, go to broken bar," she choked, voice cracking. "Oh, go to broken bar. I didn't mean, I thought it was a deer at first. And then I saw her, but she was already." I panicked. "I just a broken bar." Her composure shattered. She began sobbing. That's when Tom walked in. Barbara looked up, and recognition flickered through her tears. "You a broken bar? You're Emily's brother?" Tom nodded, his face cold and hard as stone. 10 years, Barbara. 10 years I've waited for this moment." I took a deep breath, my voice steady despite the knot in my gut. "You have 2 choices," I said. "Option 1, this video goes public to the FBI, the media, every major news outlet. You lose everything and spend the rest of your life in prison. Option 2, you resign as HOA president immediately. You confess, publicly, to all your abuses of power, the fraudulent property lines, the harassment, the theft. You pay full restitution to every family you've wronged, starting with $500,000 to Tom, for Emily, and then you leave Pine Valley forever." I set a timer on my phone. "You have 60 seconds to decide. Starting now." Barbara looked desperately at Tom. "Please, my children. They don't deserve this. They don't even know a broken bar." Tom's jaw clenched so tightly I thought it might snap. "Emily didn't deserve to die at 22 either. She was going to be a pediatric nurse. She wanted to help children." The timer ticked down. 30 seconds. 20. 10. With shaking hands, Barbara grabbed the resignation letter I'd prepared and signed it. "I'll do it," she sobbed. "I'll confess everything. Just a broken bar, please. Don't destroy my children's lives. They're innocent." I closed the laptop and looked at Tom. He gave a small, tight nod. "Your children don't deserve to lose their mother to prison," I said quietly. "But they also don't deserve to be raised by someone who thinks she's above consequences. Go fix your life, Barbara. Become someone they can actually be proud of. The next night, the special home meeting was standing room only. Every one of Pine Valley's 30 households had shown up, the tension in the room thick enough to crack. Barbara stood at the podium, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked small, human, broken. Her voice trembled as she began. "I have something to tell all of you." She confessed everything. "For the past 5 years, I've abused my position as HOA president," she said, voice shaking. "I've harassed and driven out families who did nothing wrong except question my authority. I've manipulated property lines for my own benefit. I've embezzled funds from the HOA treasury for personal expenses." The room was dead silent, punctuated only by the occasional sharp gasp. The Martinez family, the Patils, the Jacksons, they were good people. I targeted them because they challenged me, because they didn't fit the vision I had for this community. I was wrong, I was cruel, and I am deeply, deeply sorry, she went on, naming names, detailing abuses, each confession more shocking than the last. "I will be paying full restitution to every family I've wronged," she continued, "and I am establishing a $500,000 fund in memory of Emily Sullivan." At Emily's name, Tom stood up from the back, tears running down his face. The entire room turned to look at him, then back at Barbara, and the heavy weight of unspoken tragedy settled over the crowd like a cloud of concrete dust. That's when Brad stood. For 20 years, Brad had been Barbara's enabler, her yes man, her shadow, her silent accomplice. But now, something in him had finally snapped. 20 years, Brad said, his voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. 20 years I've watched you turn into this. I knew about Emily, Barbara. I always knew. I helped you cover it up because I loved you, because I was weak, because I was afraid. He pulled a manila envelope from under his arm and threw it onto the table. "Divorce papers. I'm done being your accomplice. I'm done living with the guilt. I'm done with all of it." Barbara stared, wide-eyed, as he walked out, leaving her truly alone for perhaps the first time in her life. Slowly, Tom stood. His voice shook with emotion. "I've wanted to hate you for so long," he said. "I dreamed about destroying you the way you destroyed my family." Emily was just walking home. She was texting me about her shift, excited because she'd helped deliver a baby that day. She was so full of life. "And you took that away." The room was utterly still. "But Emily wouldn't want me to live in hatred," Tom continued, his voice cracking. "She always saw the good in people. She believed in second chances. So I'm not going to forgive you, Barbara. I'll never forgive you, but I'll let you leave. Get out of Pine Valley. Try to build yourself into someone better, not for me but for your children. They deserve a mother who understands what consequences mean." The community voted unanimously to remove Barbara and the entire HOA board. Tom was elected as the new president, and his very first act was to void every absurd rule Barbara had ever pushed through. The unnecessary road maintenance fees, gone. The manipulated property lines, officially corrected. And as for my concrete barriers, the ones that had sparked this entire upheaval, they were transformed into permanent architectural features, complete with plantings and landscaping. What had once been a symbol of defiance became a genuinely beautiful garden at the entrance of Pine Valley, serving as both a traffic calming measure and a reminder of how the community had come together. Most importantly, the old cabin was officially designated as the Emily Sullivan Memorial Youth Center, where I would teach local kids construction skills, passing down the knowledge my grandfather had once taught me. About a month later, I was in the middle of showing a group of teens how to properly mix concrete when Danny burst in, grinning ear to ear and waving his phone. "Dude, you're not gonna believe this." He laughed, shoving the screen toward me. It was a viral video titled, "HOA President Tries to Steal My Property, So I Turned Her Neighborhood into a Concrete Maze." It had over 100 million views. The top comment read, "This is better than Netflix. When's the movie coming out?" I couldn't help but laugh, imagining what Grandpa Henry would think if he knew his grandson had become an internet sensation. He'd probably have no clue what the internet even is, I told Danny, grinning. But I think he'd be proud that we stood up for what was right. That evening, Tom and I sat on the cabin porch, watching the sunset spill gold and crimson across the mountains. Pine Valley had never been so peaceful. Kids ran and played in the yard outside the youth center. their laughter floating on the cool evening breeze. "You gave Barbara what Emily would have wanted," Tom said softly beside me, "a chance to rebuild herself into something better." I thought about justice and revenge and the thin, fragile line between them. I thought about the choices we make when we have power over someone who's wronged us. "Grandpa used to say," I murmured, "that concrete is permanent. Once it sets, you can't undo it. So before you pour, you have to make sure you're building something that will stand the test of time." I paused, looking out at the horizon. I guess people deserve that same chance to set properly, to become something solid, something lasting. As the credits rolled on our strange little story, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Saw your story online. I'm dealing with a similar HOA nightmare in my neighborhood. Can you help? P.S. Definitely not another HOA president, I swear." Tom read the message over my shoulder and chuckled. "Round 2? I cracked my knuckles and grinned. Better order more concrete. Brooks Construction, it seemed, was expanding now into HOA consulting. And somewhere, I like to think, Grandpa Henry was smiling because his legacy lived on not just in concrete and steel, but in the courage to stand up for what's right, even when the odds feel impossible. Because in the end, that's what real justice is, not just punishment, but the chance for redemption. Not just tearing down but building something better in its place. And sometimes, just sometimes, that's worth far more than revenge could ever be. Concrete sets permanently,